Welcome back to the 7 Factors to Successfully Lead Global Teams, our monthly PDU podcast webinar. We are in Module 2. You've seen the one about cultural intelligence already. Right now we are jumping into communication. And here once again is your presenter, Dave Cornelius. Take it away, Dave.
Global teams often use computer-mediated communications technology to work independently across space, time, and organizational boundaries. So this may include things like video and telephone conferencing, emails, Facebook, Twitter, text messages, Skype chat, wikis, collaboration tools like SharePoint, and other project collaboration tools. With respect to that, the team must adhere to some very simple principles to really help them to effectively communicate. You must do it timely and regular and have some level of responsive communications where it's not just one way. You must take some ownership and build trust between the team members as you effectively communicate. We have to understand the urgency and responding in a timely manner. One of the things that we must understand is that if team members do not understand each other, the cost of delivering the project objective is very expensive. Effective communication is central to keep team members focused on project goals and priorities. To mitigate the distance issues, one must work independently when a needed team member is unavailable. Most of the communication between team members occur via email, phone calls during a period of time when everyone is available to work together. To make this arrangement work, we must batch our questions and be diligent about communications. In the experience across time and space, leading a distributed team presents significant challenges with keeping everyone on the same page. For example, just having a recurring weekly meeting at a specific time, trying to make sure that everyone understands that is sometimes become a challenge, especially when you're working across time zones. To keep communication continuous, whether it's in a single country or across countries, things like leveraging a status report helps us to understand where we're going from week to week or from month to month. If you're dealing with time and distance, if everyone is on the West Coast and some parts of the team are on the East Coast, you're dealing with challenges of a 5-hour window where all members of the teams can work together. The problem becomes even worse when you're dealing with different countries. For example, the time difference between India and the United States is 12.5 hours when you're dealing with a non-daylight savings times and 13.5 hours during daylight saving times. One member is sleeping while the other is working. It is important for us to create a way to batch our questions and really be diligent about following up with our team members to make sure that we're sharing the information in the most efficient way.
Right. And I have an excellent example here for the last bullet point, because this is happening to me right now. I mean, that started about a week ago. We have a Scrum project that we are running, and we're running this in 2 time zones, California and the Philippines, and we want to have our daily Scrum, so our daily gathering, which is really just a few minutes that we meet. But it's rather difficult because if we do it during our time, then they're asleep, and it was really a challenge for us. So what we now decided to do is we decided to do it at 5:30 in the evening, starting on Sunday evening, because 5:30 Sunday evening in California is 8:30 Monday morning in the Philippines. So we are shifting this in time and on weekdays, so we're actually making Sunday almost a work day for us. So it's really interesting how we have to deal with time and distance in a situation like this.
And I could completely relate to that because I've led other Scrum projects with India where we've had to do similar things. As we're trying to get our daily stand-up, we would meet 7:30 at night at times to make sure that we could correlate to their morning times. And sometimes we'll switch around the responsibilities so that sometimes we don't have to work so late all the time. And sometimes they share the burden as well. So that's very interesting, what we have to do in terms of...
I had an added difficulty in setting this meeting up, because when I set this meeting up, I happened to be in Switzerland at the time. So I was in the European time zone, trying to set up a meeting for the California and Philippine time zone. I think it took me 3 or 4 times until we actually had it on the right day at the right time, because it was completely confusing. All right.
To mitigate time and space, you have to select the technology to match your communication needs. If you want to do simple collaborations, you may do things like voice over IP, which is really making a phone call. We could use instant message, or we could even do a personal webcam. If we were looking at delayed time interactions, we could send things like an email or a fax, even though faxes are becoming more and more obsolete. You look at complex collaborations where we have wikis and threaded discussions. I post a message, I get a response back, and we keep track of what's going on. Or we could deal with real-time interactions like web meetings, audio conferences, and video conferences. This helps to increase our global performance for communication. So we're more engaged, we could have more cohesion, and a greater sense of clarity.
Is there any of these 4 that you would say, this particular one is best, this should be the one that we should be striving for, this is the one we should be using for, or is it a combination of all? What's your finding here?
I believe the combination of 3 and 4 complex collaborations, which use wikis and threaded discussions, are very important, especially when you're dealing with time and space issues. And real-time interactions is very important for web conferencing, where you can effectively exchange information in real time. And what's really important when you add video conferencing is that now you have the ability to read body language, non-verbal communications, which is one of the gaps that you do have when you're dealing with distributed teams, because you can't see that individual. So video conferencing help to mitigate that.
Right. Oh, okay. I have an example for you, and I'd like to know where you would place this. One thing that we have is we need to get a lot of information across when it comes to description of features on a website. You know, we need to do this and we need to do that. And what we decided to do, we decided to record this as videos so that the person, the business user, sits in front of their screen and explains what he wants and how he needs to do this. And see, when I click here, I would like this to be red and this blue. And when I click there, this should happen. This is then presented to the development team as a recorded video. So it's neither real time. Where would this fit, this kind of collaboration tool?
Well, that collaboration tool would fit into complex collaboration.
Okay, number 3 then.
For number 3, because wikis essentially is a web space where we could exchange information, whether it's in a form of a document.
Right.
It could be a written, form of text that you exchange. So basically, you could drop your document into a wiki and add whatever additional comments that you want and wait for someone else to come and pick that up and move that through. So you could build a workflow, essentially end-to-end, to enable communication between the teams and all of the business users who are involved. Another component of communication is language. We use language to express things differently. Like if you get on the East Coast in New Jersey and you're a little Italian, you may go, forget about it. If you're in India, you may go, we have to do the needful. And if you get down south, you have people fixing to go where? One thing that we have to realize is that communication only happens when the meanings are shared. If people don't understand what do the needful or fixing to go or forget about it really means, you have miscommunication. And as a leader, you have the choice to either create a glossary of all of these terms for the team, or you could encourage people on the team to use common universal terms in a team setting. If someone uses a term that is not familiar, then politely ask the meaning of meaning for the benefit of the team members. Like, do the needful. What does that really mean?
I often get customers who lose their password or access here to the PDU podcast. And we get an email that basically just says, sorry, I cannot access the PDU podcast anymore. Please do the needful. And I interpret it simply as, would you please assist me with this problem and fix it for me? Right, in this particular sense. And by the way, let me just say, we did chuckle a couple of times about how the culture in India is, and I mean, I don't make this in any disrespect at all, because I promise you there are people out there from India, my customers, my listeners and readers, and they chuckle about the things that I do as a European living in the United States. So this is a global chuckle. We chuckle about all of us. So did I translate do the needful right, Dave?
I think you translated do needful perfectly.
What about fixing to go? Never heard of that.
Fixing to go means that I'm preparing to go to somewhere.
I'm getting ready to leave.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to leave.
Okay.
And that is something that happens in the South, and it gets even more interesting depending on the culture, within the United States. But I could also give you an example coming from the Caribbean. We said, plug it out.
Plug it out?
Plug it out. Well, if you plug it in, you have to plug it out.
So you unplug it. That's plug it out.
That's plug it out. Right. So at times I would say that, and people would look at me and go, what are you talking about?
All right, but we can't forget the first one, because we can't forget about it. What does forget about it mean?
Forget about it means that it's not something that you should worry a lot about. And that's my interpretation of it. Maybe someone else would have a different meaning than I do. In order to manage your team and manage how you communicate, it's really important for you to create a plan or a vision and make sure that you share that with your global team or your local team. Part of the plan is really of creating a communication plan is making sure that you understand who is the stakeholder or the audience, what content will you provide. So for example, your stakeholder may be the project team. The content may be a status report. How frequently will you distribute that information? So we'll do it on a weekly basis. What method would I use to distribute it? I may use it in a face-to-face meeting. I may use it for emails, and I may use a tool like SharePoint. Who is it assigned to? Who will actually produce the actual status report? Let's talk about when was it last done? What was the last action on that? So you may specify a specific date. And depending on the type of content, you may want to apply a status for that. And basically, you want to establish what is the desired outcome. For the status report, we really want to talk about the progress of our project. And you may have multiple audience in your communication plans, because you may have something for the Office of the CIO, where we're looking at benchmark reports and milestones. And we only want to do that on a monthly basis. And we may want to push that out in terms of leveraging an email or using a SharePoint site. And you assign that to someone specific on the team. And what is your desired outcome? Is really to provide an update to the executives on your team. So when you build a communication management plan, make sure that you share it with the team. And at times you may want to bring your team members and ask them to be involved in that as well.
And with that, we have come to the final slide for the communications factor. We're talking about the teamwork on communication, so the homework for our listeners here. Dave, what do you want them to do?
After reviewing this module, go back and think about, how will I create a communication plan for my team? What tools will I use to foster interactive participation by my team members? Will I leverage wikis? Will I have audio conferencing, video conferencing? Think about those things as part of your planning as well. And look at the failures that may occur during communications. If I send an email and no one didn't respond, then there was something that needed to be done. Was I proactive in the process? So go through and plan this process as you go forward after listening to the information here today.
And that's it for communications. We're now moving on to leadership.